Okay, you've got you should get a nice little picture of me in the corner as well. I think you can move it around if it's not where you want it. It's blocking the slides or whatever, so on. Now I'm going to have to shut down some things, so I won't be able to see the meeting chat for the next few minutes. Okay, so if you put something in chat, don't worry, I will get back to it, but I won't respond straight away. Okay, just let me do my housekeeping here, and once I've done that, we can get on. All right, close that one. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to look at the specification and the sample assessment materials. We're going to look over the topics. We're going to look at the assessments, and we're going to look at support and training materials. So that's fairly straightforward. Right. We're going to look at the specification. Presumably, most of you will have already been looking at this, and so we're going to sort of take a fairly quick tour through that. But much more important, we're going to look at the examination and how the papers are produced, written, assessed, and so on, and support today. Then on Thursday's session, we're going to look at some exam questions and how we mark them and how the candidates can improve their performance without learning anything new, to be honest. There are many ways of doing better in the exam just by understanding how it works. So hopefully that will be of use to everyone there. So just a quick introduction to who we are. So here's Pearson Edexcel. Based in offices overlooking the Thames in London. Very nice, grand Art Deco building. But working from all over the globe, and most of us working from home most of the time. So that is how we go. In the UK, we're a principal provider of GCSE and A-level and BTEC qualifications to UK schools and centres. And we have, of course, a huge international background as well. And people like myself will, from time to time, turn up in countries all over the globe, which is always very interesting, and find out how things are going with you guys and all the rest. So it's there. I should point out that as things become more international and more able to do things, I think now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think now there's an opportunity for you to actually join the marking team if you wanted to. But that depends on your individual country and the tax arrangements for your pay. But if you're interested, talk to your regional advisor, whoever your regional advisor is. If you're interested in coming marking, because the marking standardization is done online on Zoom, like we're doing today, you don't have to be in the UK to do the marking. Okay, overview. Obviously, you need the spec. This is pretty important, but let's get one thing clear right at the start. This specification was written 10 years ago. When we have a new qualification, we sit down, we start writing the specification, and then it has to go through various hurdles at various authorities and bodies, and it has to be checked. It then has to go out for some preliminary testing in classrooms to make sure it's actually appropriate. And in the meantime, technology has moved on. So one of the nightmares for an IT and computer science specification, both of them, is the technology is evolving faster than we can necessarily keep up with. So we're trying now to write specifications which are future-proof if we can. This means that we try to keep the specification fairly open and generic rather than specific. That's fine in terms of making sure that if new things appear on the scene, I mean, obviously the classic example at the moment is the rapid growth of AI. Oh, hang on, I've got someone waiting. Wait a minute. Yes, got them in. Okay, then that has got to be incorporated somehow into the specification. So first things first, we need to be able to understand that what's in the spec is basically the guide to what is the content, but candidates can introduce their own exemplification from recent developments. So this is the way things are going. I'm trying to explain it. So, for example, a question might be phrased in rather general terms, but allows the candidate to write in specific terms using their experiences of the latest technologies. So that's the first thing we need to sort of cover there. Okay, I hope that makes sense to people. Second thing is, there is something hidden deep within the specification called guided learning hours. The guided learning hours for this specification is 121. All right, so that means that we are expecting you to have delivered your teaching direct to your students for approximately 120 hours. The bottom end of that range is probably 90. All right, and the top end of that range could be 150, but 120 is about what is expected over the duration of the course. And one of the first things you need to start thinking about now is, how much time have I been given to deliver this qualification? All right, now, when we say guided learning hours, we mean the time they're actually in the classroom receiving tuition from a qualified teacher. It doesn't mean homework time. It doesn't mean study time or anything else. It means proper, direct teaching. If you haven't got 120 hours over your 2 years, that will be one of the reasons you may be having problems delivering the course. And it's important to understand that. It isn't essential. 90 hours can be done. A good teacher can deliver it in 90 hours. But if you've only got 60 hours, then really you're fighting a losing battle right at the start. So in the spec, you will see in the guidance for teaching it, the hours, the suggested number of hours for delivering each item is there. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that worked like that. Oh, right, okay, new feature of Zoom, don't use the scroll button. Right. We've also produced sample assessment materials. Now, these have become a little bit more or less important now because we've had quite a few examinations. But when the qualification first begins, we have to give you at least one set of exam materials for you to look at. And these are there. But now, of course, there have been numerous exams. And if you haven't yet tweaked a course, I'm sure you have, you can go on the website and you can download the question papers and mark schemes for the recent exams, right up to and including this summer's 2024 is on there at the moment. So there's now a lot more examples than just the sample assessment materials. But if you're beginning, it's a good idea to start with the SAMs because they are directed to try and help you and guide you as to how marks are awarded and so on. Makes a big difference. The content. Okay. It's very easy to think in terms of traditional examinations, in that there is a body of knowledge that the candidates need to have. But that is only a small part of this qualification. We'll come to the actual amount of it shortly. There is also the important part of applying that knowledge and also developing arguments around things. The best example I can give you is basically the one which I'm sure a lot of you get as IT teachers. I want to buy a new computer. What would you recommend? All right. I get that a lot from people. You then say, well, what are your needs? What do you want to do with it? What sort of qualities do you need of it? Where are you going to use it? How is it going to need to be portable or whatever? I'm sure you've all gone through that sort of questioning. And of course, you then give advice based on whatever the person says. You say, oh, I think you really ought to go and buy a laptop or whatever it might be, and it's going to need to have these specifications. Right. So I'm going to pause for a minute because we've had about half a dozen people recently arrive into the meeting. So for those of you who just arrived, just follow along with things, please. And I will recap later on my opening comments. Okay, so welcome if you just joined us. Just follow what's happening. Leave cameras off, please, because they, Mubaska, thank you, because that eats up our bandwidth and we start to get distortion. So the first thing is then there's going to be application of knowledge. The candidates are expected to know something and then they're going to actually put it into use in some way or other. And there's going to be critical application, weighing up of things. So although paper 1 says digital devices, it is definitely not enough just to be able to say, oh, I've got a list of digital devices here. That's it, thank you. No, we want to know what they are, obviously, that's fair enough, but then we want to know where will they be used? What would be the best one? How do they interrelate with each other? All right, how will we be using them? A lot of other questions, which are quite open questions. And then, of course, we move on to paper 2, and we have got the software skills and obviously all the collection of stuff, word processing, databases, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, and web design or web links. So this is a very much a practical qualification. We are expecting that. If you're delivering it as an academic qualification, it isn't going to work. It involves a lot of interaction, a lot of activity, and so on. Right. Nothing happened. Oh, right. We're trying to move on the slide, but... right. I'll just quickly run through it. You've got the spec, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here talking about that part of it, but I think we just need to spend a little bit of time, again, explaining what you're going to be introducing. So in other words, we are looking for hardware devices and we're looking for the ones that are appearing online. It's no good teaching about floppy disks or something like that. It's gone completely. We're looking for you to introduce the hardware and the components that people would use today. So that's very, very important. That list of devices is covered in the specification, and I'm just turning to it now, if you're wondering what's going on. But you'll see straight away it is left quite generic. So we have lots of, so for example, 1.14 says know about tablet devices. But then notice 1.15, be able to describe the purpose and use of other digital devices. Right, and then another one says know about navigation aids and how they are used. Now I know there's a danger here. I would have done it myself. Oh right, yeah, sat navs, great, done. But there's a bit of question coming after it and how they are used. How do people use sat navs? It's not sufficient to know how they work. It's also sufficient in what context would they be used. And obviously you do have to use your sort of widen here. I mean, I go a lot of walking in the mountains and I use sat nav for that. It's not just sat navs for cars, it can be sat navs for all sorts of things. Delivery drivers who are bringing materials to a house will now be using sat nav because it takes them straight to the property. And also sat navs have other features like they show congestion and alternative routes. So you're going to have to, if I'm hammering it, sorry, but this is important because this is where people are losing marks. It's not just how it works, it's how it's used that matters here as well. And the same thing belongs to software. Same argument belongs to software. It's not good saying, well, yeah, there's word processing software, but what is it going to be used for? And understanding that there are differences between using a spreadsheet for something and using a table in a Word document. Both may look the same, but they have totally different purposes. So that's important in the digital devices. Connectivity, this is perhaps more traditional. we all know this really, but it's not. It's also a huge issue now is the fourth point there, network security. And we would expect candidates to have examples of their own to bring to the exam of all these things. So if they have, for example, been a recent, I mean, in the UK here, we've had a few recent problems, I'm sure you may have as well, then these are things which the students need to be able to introduce into their answer. So they could say, for example, having talked about network security issue, in July last year in the UK, this happened or that happened, or whatever, and that was an example. The most recent one we had is on our railway network. There was a evil twin Wi-Fi connection set up. So you can get all sorts of things which you can then have specific examples. So it should not be answered in just general terms. It needs to be answered in terms of specifics. Otherwise, I don't think there's too much to dwell on there. That's, I mean, pretty much any textbook is going to cover all your network connections and stuff like that. Okay, then we need to look at operating online. And again, this can start to change over time as we increasingly use cloud computing and other issues arrive. And obviously, this is where we can get all the issues of people being caught out and scammed and conned and things like that. How organisations, our London Transport, for example, at the moment is unable to show real-time information on its website because of a 16-year-old hacker who had got in earlier in the summer and caused complete chaos as a result. So they got to look at those features there. And again, I'm not going to dwell on it because I'm pretty sure you're professionals. What the emphasis I'm making is you're going to need to keep up to date with what's happening in your community, in your country, so they can bring those examples into the exam. Online goods and services probably seems to be about the easiest one, but we do need to also think in terms of more broadly. The second topic on this is impact on individuals and organisations. And we don't just mean of having online goods and services, but what about people that don't have online goods and services? What impact is it having on the shopping centres in a town? What's happening there because of the fact that more and more people are buying stuff online? So you do need to look at both sides of the picture here and a bit broader. And again, you notice we've kept it very, very generic there. We're not talking just as online software, it doesn't say anymore, allowing for new developments that we haven't yet seen. Okay, 5 and 6 though, and paper 2. You might feel actually you're back on safer ground here because basically it's teaching people how to use spreadsheets, databases, word processing and so on. But it's to a purpose, and that's very important to understand. And sense of audience and purpose is very important in this stage. So that's the thing there. But I think I won't dwell on there because I'm pretty sure you all know what the software is and so on. Just while we're there, though, we should point out that there's an expectation of you to use software that we can also use here with our examiners. So if, for example, you suddenly found this super duper word processor, it's not going to work for paper 2 if you're submitting the work in the format that no one else can read because you've just discovered something in your particular area. We'll come back to those issues later in the training. All right. Now, before I go any further, all right, I want to basically just give chance for any messages, chat. So if you have put something in chat, I'm just going to have a look at that now and see what we've got. Right, so we've had a question about the sound. Oh, is my video hiding? Oh, sorry about that. I thought I'd put it somewhere useful. Tell you what, we can get rid of that. That's an option I can do in a minute. You don't need to keep staring at me and so on. The link is now there, by the way. If you haven't downloaded the resources, you can see Hansel has posted a link in the chat window, and you can download the resources from there. And that seems to be the limit of chat now. Okay, I will. I'm going to stop sharing so I can get rid of the camera view. Right, and then we're going to share again. Right, and we'll take off me. Right, and that one. Hopefully that's better for people. Okay. Oh yes, I've just seen. Thank you. I do apologise if my pronunciation of your names isn't correct. I do apologise, but it's so very hard with little context to go with. But Dehivia, I hope, something like that anyway. Could you please provide a guidance on answering the 8-mark questions? Oh yes, we will be doing that. I quite understand. That's a really tricky one. You'll get a little bit on it today, but most of it will be on Thursday. It is a very difficult area, getting the marks right. And I've got hopefully some really useful, helpful things on how to get that better. So hopefully by the time we finish today, you'll be more confident, and by the time we finish on Thursday, you'll be really confident and happy about it. We do know you're not alone in wondering, what do I do with these levels questions? I can't work it out. So yes, that will be covered. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Now, I say we've been going and we've had an awful lot of people join us. I wasn't expecting that. So good morning if you've just joined us. Good afternoon or good evening as appropriate, and welcome. This is being recorded, so if you missed the start, you can get the recording. You'll get a link to it after the meeting finishes, and you can go back and see the bit you missed when you came in. And then something else is coming forward here. I like the worksheet resources. Okay, now then, folks, let me understand my role here. My role is as an examiner, and I'm afraid my area of expertise is in examining and marking and getting standards right and interpreting specifications and stuff like that. I am not a resources person, I'm afraid. And if you're needing more resources, I'm afraid I can't personally help you, but I can give you a hint of where you might look. On Facebook, there are many communities in the UK promoting IT resources. And so if you were to look onto Facebook and just put in GCSE Information Communication Technology, right, or ICT, you should find people who are producing materials, usually practicing teachers, and the practicing teachers are usually producing some good stuff. But obviously we can't recommend anything. We can't say this particular person's good or whatever. You have to look at that too. But if you're looking for materials, can I suggest a search on Facebook for GCSE computer science? Don't put IGCSE, just put GCSE. It's near enough the same qualification in terms of content as the international. Not identical, but similar. And you might also, those of you who are doing computer science, by the way, I think there is a very excellent UK GCSE computer science group. And again, they're on Facebook. And they're very worthwhile. And I think they're just getting used to the idea now that they've got international members coming in as well. So hopefully that might help you there. Right. So how are you going to be getting things right? How are you going to do things right? Well, the specification, obviously, first of all, please, please, please keep referring to it. Okay. We have also provided with schemes of work and lesson plans and year planners, and these are editable and amendable. I do understand, having visited some schools in Asia over the recent years, a lot of you actually don't really have 6 terms. You really only have 5. You have three 3 terms in the first year, and then by around about March of the second year, things are winding up in terms of teaching, because you've got other commitments and stuff like that, holidays and other things coming along. And so you may need to sort of tweak our lesson planners. They don't always work directly. But anyway, that's, oh, I've done it again. Sorry. Gotta be so careful. The scroll wheel takes me through all the slides very quickly. Right. Now then, I'm going to have a little bit of a break because I've been talking for a while. All right. And we're going to give you just a sort of thing which you can, what you're going to do is, all right, we're going to take a smartphone, get your own smartphone out, all right, and compare what you have now with what you had, say, 10 years ago. What's changed? What can your phone do now that it couldn't do 10 years ago? In my case, I still have a recollection of a very exciting time, nearly 20 years ago, when I was on a train and I demonstrated to someone how, with my rather primitive phone at the time, I could get the train times up. It was quite complicated, but you could do it. But things obviously moved on. So what we're having is a little 5-minute breather, so that you can think about this. Would you like to, you can choose, you can either send it to everyone in the chat, or if you prefer, if you're shy, you can just send it to me by choosing my name, Malcolm Holmes, in the chat to button. Can you send me a thought, just one thought per person of what's different? Okay, so, you know, in these last 10 years, what are you, if you like, the thing you've most valued about that? I'm going to give you a chance to have a think, put your answers into chat, and we're going to resume at, yeah, let's have a little breather, quarter to whatever hour you happen to be on. For me, it's 9:45. For you, it could be anything. Of course, if you're in a couple of countries, and it's going to be 15:15 because you're a half hour different. But you know where you are, don't you? In about 7 minutes' time, in other words. And I will just switch the video off now and the sound, and then we'll be back. If you want to put something in the chat in the meantime, I'll be looking at that, and I can perhaps answer that while you're having this little break. Okay, back at 1:45. I've just submitted a few people. If you're wondering what's going on, we're having a very short break to rest my voice and to let people answer a question that's on the screen. So those of you, just I think about half a dozen of you just joined us. Hopefully you can pick up where we're going. This is being recorded, so you will be able to get a copy of the recording for the bits you've missed. We'll restart in about a minute's time. Well, thank you very much, everyone. There's been some great comments. If you haven't seen, you'll need to scroll up and down the chat box or make it a lot bigger because we got a lot of comments in from people there. Thank you very much about differences. I do appreciate the person who says they're showing their age. Yeah, it's it's hard to think of a time when we didn't even have internet access, let alone on phones. Yeah, it's quite strange, but I think there's some really good comments there, and you might want to take them for it. There is an option at the bottom of the chat box. If I remember rightly, it's a little. You can copy the chat if you want. You can do a copy of the chat, or is that just me? It might just be my one, but if it's there. So anyway, I love that. Some people sent me direct messages, which you may have missed, but they're really brilliant and good, that's great. So now you've got some idea really of what we actually want your students to do. And that is they've got to make those same sort of comparisons. It's no good just saying, oh, this has got this, but what did it have in the past? Now, okay, they haven't got the longevity of memory that you have, but even so, it'd be important for you to try and get them to understand that these things are evolving and changing, and even in their lifetimes, they can probably come up with some changes that have happened in the last 5 years and so on. This last couple of weeks ago, I was in a shopping centre in Leeds, and I actually used an AI chatbot to get an answer, and I thought, oh gosh, how things are developing. Okay. Welcome to any other new people. We seem to have quite a lot of you. We're up to 50 participants, which is very difficult for me to manage. So do apologise if I don't get round to answering a question from you. I will try to, but I wasn't expecting quite so many people. We had thought we're going to have about 30. But we'll see how it goes. So anyway, that's as far as we got so far. And now I'm going to just get rid of this. So do apologise while I do this. Oh, that doesn't work. That's gone there. Right. This is an example which we were preparing for, basically. So Kiki meets her friend Zara. Draw a diagram to show how Kiki's smartphone can be used to provide Zara's tablet computer with an internet connection. Label each component and the connectivity you use in your diagram. Okay, now we'll deal with a lot of things here just on this. First of all, in a question, exam question, students need to be able to identify several key requirements, right, of the question. And this one, the important thing to get students to understand is obviously they see draw a diagram. Woo, right, we're off. I'm going to draw a diagram. But that's not really what they should be looking for. They can take that for granted, really. What you've got to try and persuade them to do is to read on more carefully. And it's important to see that the diagram has to show how the smartphone, right, will be connected to a tablet computer so that the tablet computer has an internet connection. All right. That is very, very important. They need to sit there for a few moments, reading the question, underlining key words, having a think about it. Now, the command word is draw. So that's dead easy. In other words, there's no analysis here. There's no making judgments. We simply need to draw a diagram.
Okay, sir, after 1 week, then wait. After 1.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. Do watch your microphones and you don't unmute them by mistake. Oh, right. Okay, and as I said, oh, sorry, people that just joined us recently, don't put your cameras on because it ruins our bandwidth and everything gets very distorted. Right, so they've done that. Label each component and the connectivity you use in your diagram. So then in a little brackets, 4. So if you're getting your students to really analyze a question, you say, okay, I've got to label the components and the connectivity, and there's 4 marks. So basically, you can take it when you've got only a few marks, that sort of equates to 4 specific items, right, that you need to do. So the answer we would expect would be some means of connecting the internet to the smartphone. First point, pointing out that it's going to have to be not just assuming a smartphone's connected to the internet, but to explain how it's connected. It's going to have a mobile data connection. Okay, so please think about that. First point then. Now they easily miss that one. They just assume that a smartphone is going to work. No, you need to explain that a smartphone has to have some sort of 3G, 4G, 5G connection. And so that's got to be put into the diagram. The tablet has to somehow be physically or non-physically connected to the smartphone. So how are you going to demonstrate that? Is it going to be connected by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or are you going to use a USB cable? So that needs to be put into there. And they have to be labeled. If you go to the SAMs, the sample assessment materials, which we included in the download you've had today, you'll see some examples where the candidates have answered this question and how it's marked. Now, I don't know, and you don't know, if I was giving this training session again in 5 years' time, how that might have changed. It might be a completely different answer. Okay, and we have to keep up with the technology and as it moves on. Okay, I bet most of you skipped over this bit in the spec. I always did when I was teaching. I never thought, oh God, I don't know what this is about. This is boring stuff, but it's so important. Your assessment objectives. We have 3. The first one is good old-fashioned know something. AO1, demonstrate knowledge and understanding. So it's not just know, understanding, and I appreciate, of course, a lot of you must be using English as your second language, but there is an awful difference between knowledge and understanding. We'll explain this in a minute. And that's the first point. But AO1 is the know stuff. AO2 is apply stuff. All right. So take what I know and use it in some meaningful way. And AO3 is actually weigh it up, make judgments, think about it. Okay. Now, when I was teaching in a school in Wales a long time ago, if a pupil arrived late to the school and you say, why are you late? The typical answer you would get is, it's only now I have arrived. Now, that's a lovely example of knowledge, or AO1. It's a statement of fact. Look, I am physically here in front of you. And it is therefore, and they always thought we're answering the question. He's asked me why I'm late. It's because I'm only here now. Because it doesn't answer the question at all. It's making a statement which you can't argue with. They are physically in front of you, but it doesn't actually explain it. So we might move on, and they might say, it's only now arrived, I missed the bus. Now you have an expansion on that statement now, which is giving you some better idea of what's going on, but it hasn't done much more. So now sort of thinking, okay, I'm applying what I know. I can now say to someone, I didn't get the bus. But you're left with the, why didn't you get the bus? Oh, my alarm clock didn't go off. And so you have, I mean, nowadays you wouldn't have your alarm clock, but this was a long time ago. And so you now have a reason, and we're going to have to try and demonstrate that as we go through these things, that there is a difference between knowing, applying, and giving a specific reason, making a judgment on the situation that helps you understand the situation. Okay, so AO1, what we know, it features strongly on paper 1, and goes to this one here. It features strongly on paper 1, where it's between 20 and 23% of the marks, and should point out, as the paper is marked out of 100, it's therefore between 20 and 23 of the marks. AO2, I mean, gets more share on paper 2, and AO1 doesn't. So paper 1, a lot of it is to do with knowledge, and then some more to do with understanding. Go back there to the applying it and analysing it. But paper 2, you can see AO2, applying and analysing, becomes much more important. So the papers are very distinctly different in terms of what they try to assess. Paper 1 is looking more for arguments, discussion, factual statements, whereas paper 2 is looking for application, doing, and understanding why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, and that's very important. So, okay, right. Okay with that? Hopefully, right. The papers are equally marked. They're both marked out of 100. And so, again, you can very easily work out where the ARs go with a mark. They match. Paper 1 is a 90-minute written exam, and we will look at some features of this in a minute, but just explain what happens here. This paper, and this is important to understand, is, as you know, if you've done it, posted to the UK, to a place in Yorkshire where there are a multitude of scanners, very fast scanners, as you might appreciate. And your candidate's answers are basically scanned and then split. So an examiner does not see an entire paper, right? The examiners are all different. So, for example, the computer will mark the multiple choice questions. A graduate marker will mark the short answer questions, and an ICT specialist will mark the long answer questions. Okay. So there is a very big sharing out of information of that student's paper. Now, what this is important to students is they must learn that they must answer within the spaces allocated. If their answers start running on below the space allocated, there's a chance it might get truncated by the scanners. And although there's always the opportunity to go back later when the results are published and get it sorted out, obviously better if it doesn't happen. So if a student is overrunning the space, it's better, far better for them to start a separate piece of paper. They get an extension paper, in the exam they have these extension sheets, right? And whatever they do not just write it generally somewhere. I wrote it on the back cover or something. No, because it's going to get missed by the system. Someone's not handling that exam paper physically. So if they do it, remember to do additional answer sheets and indicate in their answer that they have continued on the additional answer sheet. So they might write their answer and on the very last line, continued on answer sheet, or something like that, just so that whoever's marking it knows that they need to go and look at the additional pages that might have come with the paper. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. And the types of questions, the way they're assessed and all the rest of it, we'll come to in a while. Okay, now each question usually has a scenario. All right, and those scenarios are meant to be referred to. In other words, if they give you a scenario in the question, candidates should make an effort to actually relate to that scenario. Okay, paper 2 is very, very different, as I think some of you probably discovered. All right, and it has changed. All right, in the slides here, we have the old version. This is what you used to do. You used to make printouts of their work, which is then marked as a physical paper by expert markers. That does not apply anymore. In 2022, we changed how this is done. So if you should see reference, I've left it here to make sure if you're looking at references to printed materials for paper 2, that does not happen anymore. Okay. Now they will submit the actual files that they have done, and they will send these through a system called Learner Work Transfer. That's what the UK version is, or for you, so in other words, you're sending work, and then our markers use a parallel system called Learner Work Assessment. I'm going to have to labour this one because it's very important. It's not getting it right for some people. So we'll deal with the exam in a while, but let's just deal with the practicalities of this because that's probably what you need to know. The exam will take place within a window of 5 days. You can choose how to divide that time up and how you're going to divide up your cohort. But please, please don't leave it to the last day. View the last day of the window as a contingency. It's going to be there in case things go wrong during the exam period. Right, and therefore you have a chance. Now, if you don't do that, you can't carry on beyond the window. It's no good going on to Pearson and saying, oh, sorry, we had a power cut during the exam, we couldn't do it, we'll have to do it next week. That's not going to work. You need to do it at the start of the window as much as possible, allowing for the fact that you can then always use the additional days you haven't allocated in case something goes wrong. First thing. Secondly, each cohort needs to be able to get on with the exam without being able to see other people's work. Now, in reality, you can't stop that. It's impossible. But you do have to try and think of how am I going to deliver this exam. Maybe I'll have to deliver it over more than one sitting, especially if you've got a lot of students, so that they can be sat further apart. Maybe alternate computers are being used. And that would meet most of our requirement, right? Right. Okay, I see a question come up from Divya. I will answer that shortly, okay? I have seen it come up. Right, the next point to make is that the practicality of it. You're going to get the candidates working offline. We have still got examples of centres where candidates are working with internet connections. This is not permitted. All right, please, please make sure that they understand it has to be offline and they can only use the resources that are provided within the software that they are using. I mean, if a software has stuff with it, you can use it. There's nothing to stop you using the help pages in Word or whatever, or bringing up anything that might be built into it, like shapes and stuff like that. That's fine, but you can't be on the internet. You can't use that part of it. Okay, your technicians will receive the files a week before the exam happens, and of course it's up to them to make sure that these files are then provided to the students individually in their own folders. It helps hugely to have 2 copies of everything. One folder which they're going to use during the exam and a reserve folder in case they get things wrong. At least they can go back to the original version and start again. So have a backup folder. All right. Okay, I see another question coming up, which I'm coming to. Okay, don't worry, Pamela, we're getting to that one. All right, the candidates do their work, whatever's required to them on paper 2, and then they save their files in a format that can be easily used. So obviously any of the generic formats like Word and PowerPoint and so on are fine. All right. This is where you're looking for, but you can also have one of the open forms as well if you want to. Word's gone from my head, I do apologize. Open source software. Okay, providing it's universally available, but it's far better if it comes as a Word document, a PowerPoint document, an Excel spreadsheet, and so on. Okay, and they will save these files with an appropriate name. Now they have one evidence folder, which unsurprisingly is called evidence. And in that folder, they're going to answer any questions that are asked that are just specific right and answer question, or they're going to put, and they're going to put any screenshots, mostly from the database question. Then they'll also have another folder that might be called something to do with the exam. So it might be the shopping list, or it might be the logo, but they will be told in the exam paper in black bold print will be the title of the file that they need to save it as. It'll be the same file that they start with as well. They save these files into a work folder of their own, and that is as far as the student goes. That's the student's job, to get them all with the right file name put into one single folder with their candidate name and number on it. Okay, that's what the students do. Right, they do not need to include the original files. They certainly do not need to include any versions that didn't work. In other words, oh, here's one I did earlier during the exam and it wasn't very good, but I'll put it in anyway. We only want the final versions. That's very important. So there won't be a lot of files. There'll probably be half a dozen files, so to speak, in there. Now those are then secured. The next stage is up to your IT technicians. They will then need to take each candidate's work and zip it into a single zipped folder, compressed file folder, by any means that they think is appropriate. And they upload that single zip file to the learner work transfer under that candidate's name. And the file name they're giving it, it will be the center number, the candidate name, the candidate's number. Sorry, the other way around. Center number, candidate name. It does say in the documents, it tells you how to do that. Right. So you will then upload that to learner work transfer for your entire center. There's a snag. All right. If you get something wrong having uploaded it, the only way it can be changed is by downloading everything back to the center and re-uploading the whole submission. You can't just send an update. Now, it's not a big deal, admittedly, because obviously you're going to have it all at the center anyway. But obviously it does help to try and get it right. Now, I know that's quite a lot, so I'm just going to look at the questions. All right. Right. First one's asking, how do the papers assessed? Well, you will go to, I forgot. Oh, I do apologise. One of the advantages of being elderly is you can say I've forgotten the word, and it'll come to me in a minute. But Results Plus, thank you. You go to Results Plus, and in Results Plus, you can get a breakdown of the students' marks for paper 2. They won't be against the paper, of course, but you have already got within the centre the students' files. So you can take the breakdown, which will be 100 individual marks, and they will tell you where they've been awarded or not awarded with the mark scheme in your hand. So with the mark scheme in your hand, the Results Plus results for your student, and your copy of the student's files, you'll be able to see how they've done and where they got the marks from. Hopefully that answers Dehire's question, I think. How you submit the files then? Okay, a question came up. you will basically take the files from the students, and then you have usually 2 days in which to process those files and send them. Can I emphasize, it's better to be a day late getting the files off than getting them all done badly and wrong and having to then bring them all back and redo them. So we do understand that sense. Usually the window is Monday to Friday, and the deadline for getting the files into Pearson's is the Tuesday following. So you've got the weekend and the Monday and Tuesday. And of course, if you are starting the exam earlier in that week, you can get some of them processed, ready to go, but you send them all in one block. I won't comment on how you can use Chromebooks. You can certainly give them a go. If you think they're going to work and they have all right, then that's fine. I don't see a problem. I'm just a little bit concerned about how that would work for the web design. But if you know how to make it work, then yeah, fine. Doesn't matter what computer you use. So on. How about material which looked like the exam material for teaching, practicing purposes? Right. Okay. Ah, I see. Chromebooks may require internet to work, might they? Oh, yes. No, you can't do it then. Interesting question there. Yes, I'm sorry. That's a tricky one. Yes, if it has to have an internet connection, you can't do it. Is there possibly a way of having an internet connection just so the Chromebook will operate rather than actually access any information? Yeah, I'm sorry for that person. It's Mubasha. I can't answer it any further for you, I'm afraid. That's something you may need to go to Pearson's with. Now, at the end of this presentation, you'll see a link to our advisor. I think that's going to be a question for him. Okay, and he will have to look into that for you. I'm afraid I can't answer it for you. Okay, have I covered that? I think I have. So the paper 2 is quite complicated, but I'm going to come back to it again later as well. So we'll see how it goes. Right. We want to look at the exam paper itself. This is one of my occupations. We should point out that the 2026 paper has already been written, all right, as well as the 2025 papers. So it gives you an idea of how long the lead into these things is. But a paper is written by the principal examiner, and then someone like me, who's called a reviser, looks at the paper and decides what recommendations might be made. All right, I'm not a reviser for IT. I'm not allowed to be a reviser for any paper which I do training on. So I can't tell you. I have no idea what's in the exam, so that's safe. Okay, and then the paper is redrafted, and it goes to something called a QPEC, which is a question paper evaluation committee, usually comprised of about a dozen IT specialists. They will look through that and decide if there's any ambiguity problems, especially with international papers. Could it be misunderstood by a certain culture or something like that? And then finally, a person called a scrutineer sits the paper and tries to answer it as if sitting the exam. Obviously, you can guess this takes an awful lot of time. So if the 2006 paper is already ready, 2026 paper is ready, it probably started back last year in 2023. So papers take a long time to prepare and bring forward, and they are very carefully structured. Paper 1 is structured like this. This is called a sawtooth assessment structure. As you will see, the idea being that we've got grades 1 to 9 up the left-hand side, and question 1 will have access to grades 1 to 5. All right, candidates will have questions which we, in our judgment, feel can be answered by a candidate on grades 1 to 5. Question 2 might take the upper end of that a bit further, so grades 1 to 6. And then question 3 may have no grade 1 questions, but now extends up to grade 7. And you can see it, you can work out how it goes. So in other words, as the paper advances through the questions, the difficulty builds through the questions, but the start of a question is always easier than the end of a question. Having said that, that isn't always the case. because it's very difficult to do. And occasionally, a very simple question might occur at the end, or part of a question might occur at the end of a question number. But generally speaking, it's there. So the best advice to give your students is that they need to progress through the paper, stopping when they get problems. In other words, if, for example, they get to question 3 and they can't do the end of question 3, for goodness sake, don't struggle with it. Go on to question 4, which starts again at level grade 3. Right? So they were trying to answer grade 7 question in question 3, can't do it. So go on to question 4 and start with a grade level 3 answer. Hopefully with that. That is paper 1. Paper 2, though, looks like this. In other words, for the 5 questions that are asked, all grades are possible. Okay? So, in other words, that's important to understand. So in this case, a good candidate really needs to understand they've got to get everything done on every question if they want to get to a level 9. Okay, so just recapping, going back, that's how paper 1 looks. So your strategy for your best students was make sure you're doing the last questions, don't miss those. That's where you're going to get your 8 and 9 grade marks. And for your weaker students, for goodness sake, drop out of a question when you find you can't do it. For paper 2, on the other hand, everything is available in every question. So therefore, a good candidate needs to answer as much as possible, all right, all the way through. And equally, it doesn't matter whether they answer question 1 or question 5, both will have the full range of grades available. Okay, I mentioned this bit about how the paper's marked. There's 4 types of markers. There's the computer and so on, the clerical, the graduate, the expert. We won't need to dwell much on that. However, here we come. And this question was asked earlier. Some questions on paper 1 are levels marked. And whilst on Thursday we're going to look at a lot of things, we have trying to cover this twice. We're going to cover this topic, levels marking, twice, because it is such a tricky area to get the head around. In the mark scheme, there will be 2 parts to this. The first part will be the descriptors you see here, and the second part will be some of the expected content. Okay, are you with that? There are 2 parts. These descriptors and second part, expected content. All right, so what things the candidates might answer. There are 3 levels and therefore 3 pairs of marks available. The descriptors at each level refer to the top of that level. So for level 1, the descriptor you can see there will be some attempt at analysis. There may be limited to a review, restatement of the problem. There will be limited explanation, outcomes of analysis, response will lack clarity and organization. That all goes at the top. If you've got all those things, you're on 3 marks. That's very, very important to get your head around. All right. So for 1 mark, we're not expecting all that. We're not expecting all that. In fact, very little of that. Same applies for level 2. The statements there apply to 5 marks. They apply to 5 marks. 4 marks will only meet some of those statements. And for level 3, the statements there are for 8 marks. All right, the statements there are for 8. They do not need to have all of them. Okay, so this is not a mark scheme where you have to meet certain criteria. These are hopes, expectations, and intentions. All right, so that's the very important difference you're going to get here. All right, hang on a second, folks. Hang on. Sorry, my coffee's just arrived, if you're wondering what's happening. Keep me going. Right. Okay. Now, are you okay with that? I'm just going to pause for a moment and just let that sink in. The statements there on that grid are for the 3, 5, and 8 mark awards. They do not all have to be there. Okay. Next statement. You can judge this initially by another way. I have 3 words which I like to use, and they are at level 1, the answer will be chaotic. It will be a collection of disjointed statements. There'll be some truth in it. There'll be obviously some stuff which may be no sense at all, and there'll probably be an awful lot of repetition. So level 1, it's not going to look pretty. It's not going to feel that reassuring at all. All right. Level 2, there will be a competent answer. It has structure. The candidate has put forward some good arguments and so on, but it may not be very well organized. It may be a bit disjointed, but you can feel that they have got some grasp of the question and what's required. And level 3 is confident. The student knows what they're doing and it comes across in their writing. You can feel that they're on top of it. You can tell that they know what's going on here. It's not a problem for them. They are confident. So chaos, competent, confident. Okay. Now those are not official descriptors and you certainly wouldn't mark by them, but they're ways of helping you get your brain engaged onto this levels marking system. Right. And yes, the question come up, we need more examples of 8 mark. You mean questions that got 8 marks? Yes. I can see your point there. It's very difficult. We don't, as you might guess, we don't see many, obviously, because this is going to be a top level candidate. And so our first problem is whilst we've got a wealth of 1 and 2 mark questions, we haven't got many 8 mark questions. But I will take that point that we need to get more examples sent out to you. It's a good point because you need to know how to deliver this. You need how to deliver it. Now, interestingly enough, you can go and look at the same thing in other qualifications and you'll see the same sort of sets of statements. So in other words, the statements here aren't specifically IT always. They can just be, you can see they're quite generic really. So that's the first point. So the second aspect, which I'm not showing you today, but we'll look at on Thursday, is the indicative content, the sort of things we're expecting students to write and how they get there and take it through. Now, I just take that slowly. Hopefully that gives you some idea of what's going on. And it's really only meant to be a sort of curtain raiser to Thursday when we look at things in more detail. But are there any other questions there for us at the moment? Okay, we're coming back to that. So if you haven't quite got it today, don't worry, you'll have it. Right. Now then, mark schemes. You think, well, I know what a mark scheme is. But do you? Right. That mark scheme obviously has several elements to it. And whilst there are correct answers, we can never get it always perfect. To give you some idea, the mark scheme has to be written at the same time as the exam paper. And that, as I just told you, could be 3 years previous. So when the actual exam is sat, we are going to get a situation whereby new things might be turning up. And we then end up, normally to about half a dozen of us, sitting in a room for as much as 2 days, looking at sample answers that candidates have done and saying, all right, is our mark scheme valid? Is it going to work? And so on. What happens when we get someone doing something wacky? Do we need to put additional guidance into the mark scheme so that people know? So when you look at your mark scheme, you'll see the anticipated correct answers, but please, please, please never treat them as infallible. because somewhere someone is going to come up with another answer that's correct and we haven't anticipated. So therefore, when you're looking at the mark schemes, and especially if you're looking at historic mark schemes now, say from paper 2-3 years ago, there's probably many more new answers that are coming in that would have got marks if that paper had been sat today. So remember that they're not hard and fast things. All right. So that I ignore that exam paper thing. So this is the next thing. Okay, exam technique. We will focus on this more on Thursday, but there is the element of the command word, and as maybe your students are speakers of English as a second language, it's very important to get them to understand what command words do. In the back of the specification are the command words, and they're the ones that say things like draw, write, explain, analyze, discuss. And you need to spend time with your students going through how those words work. All right. They need to understand that the paper has more than enough space for their answer, providing, of course, they don't get it wrong. The usual reason for running out of space is they start to write an answer, they then think, oh, no, that's not what I want to put, and they then have to go back and cross that out and do something next. So that happens, then they need to understand that they need to indicate where they might have continued on to additional sheets of paper, if it's appropriate. This has become very popular in the UK, and it is one which I think a lot of people are now adopting, is you take an old paper, you sit them in the exam room, as they would be for the exam, you give them the exam paper question as possible as a real thing, pass one, all right, but then you walk through them, each question on the paper, you take a question at a time, you discuss it with the students, you ask them to say what you think they're going to do, you talk at the key words, you talk about how to plan it. They then do that task, you start the clock and say, okay, this is going to take you 20 minutes because it's got 20 marks or whatever it might be, and you get them to do it, and then you talk through the next question and you do the same. Now, this is going to take up an awful lot of time, so it may not be ideal, but it's what we think now is working really well. So they have, if you like, a led walkthrough. They've led through the paper, and they can see the questions. You've talked to them about it. They've tried to do it. They've practiced doing it. Then they do the next question, next question, next question. And these are called walking, talking exams. And you can do it for paper one as well. You can get them all sat down in the exam idea, in the room that they might do the exam, and you say, okay, let's take question one, let's read it through together, let's talk about it, let's get your ideas. Now you've got 10, 15, whatever minutes necessary to answer that question, and then we'll do question two. And so walking, talking exams, but yes, they're going to use up a lot of your curriculum time. Okay, we are just going to go look at the support materials and how they work, and because these are very, very important. Are there any questions at this stage, though? Because I'm going to stop for 5 minutes. Okay, we're having a short 5-minute break. We'll restart at just over 5 minutes. We'll start at 25:02. We'll start at 25:02. In the meantime, please send questions in on chat, and I'll look at those. I've just seen one come in. For the copy of today's recording, you will be sent an email link within 24 hours of this meeting. Again, that will also coincide with you receiving your, I presume, certificate of attendance. So you'll get an email with a link to the recording. Okay, I'm going to stop because my voice is going, and we'll restart at 25 to the hour. A couple of people have just joined recently in the last few minutes. I don't know if you have been in the meeting and dropped out and come back. If you've just arrived, then I'm afraid you missed a large chunk of it, but it is being recorded and you can get the recording, so go back onto it. But we're restarting in about 2 or 3 minutes time. We're just having a short brief break for questions and for me to recover my voice. Okay, folks, let's into the final stage. Just go through the support that might be available to you and a couple of questions that came up while we're away. Just point out again, you can download this from an email link you'll be sent after this. Providing you've attended, you'll get the link sent to you. As to whether there's a chance of ICT modular exams next year, I really doubt it. I think, pretty well locked into the end of the 2-year exam, or at least it's twice a year now, November and so on. But we have a new government here in the UK, and that can influence how all these things change. So I just no idea. We can't say. But generally speaking, I think we're going to carry on as we are for the next few years. That was all the questions, I think it was. Yeah. Okay. The Getting Started guide is pretty essential stuff if you haven't looked at it yet. So please refer to that if you're about to start. We do offer face-to-face training. Currently, I'm looking at training in Asia, specifically the Maldives, the Sri Lanka, India, and possibly Bangladesh. But that is for computer science. That's for computer science. If you wanted to have face-to-face training, you need to talk to your regional advisor as to the practicalities of it. And how it might be organised, whether it's even going to be, and they can then put a request through to training from Pearson to see if someone like myself can be sent out to see you. So that's a possibility, and that's there. But I have to point, after COVID, it's very cautious that we're doing the face-to-face training. There is a second online event to go with this, which is the feedback from the summer exam. So the other thing you might want to subscribe to is the online training, which is called Feedback, chief examiner's feedback from the summer exam. And it's a similar meeting to this, but basically they're going to work through the 2024 papers and say where people did well, did badly. And that is usually conducted by the chief examiner. So you've got a good chance to get it from the horse's mouth. If you can't get to that, or you can't for any reason, do please read the chief examiner's report. The chief examiner's report. These are published each year, and they provide a summary of the issues that the markers found during the marking period. They are so important. If you've not used them before, please read them. They are so good, and you can read them for each exam period. So each exam session has a report, and those will relate to specific questions. They will say where candidates did well, where candidates did badly, generally speaking, overall, and so on. In a while, I'll give you Tim's email address and contact details. He's your subject advisor for IT, and he will do a lot for you. There are IT community forums, which are based on other suppliers, so you can go to those. As I mentioned, especially Facebook. If you go there and put in GCSE ICT as a search, you should be able to find some groups to join and people there. We have schemes of work, and those are available to download. We have skills mapping, which is also available to download, and we have sample assessment materials. Okay, those were produced at the start of the qualification, so do allow for the fact that they will be necessarily, by now, a little out of date in terms of content, because things have moved on. So remember, the sample assessment materials were probably written around about 2018, 2017. So obviously, they won't necessarily cover the latest things that are happening. We have exemplar mark responses. These are different to the SAMs. The sample assessment materials basically just are some questions for you, but there are exemplar mark responses. And in fact, you've downloaded today, you should have downloaded one with amongst the stuff you've already got. And there you can see exactly papers marked and so on and so on. Obviously, there's past papers, we know that, and there's mark schemes. Now, what's more important is Results Plus. Results Plus works in two ways. This is very much up to you. When we mark papers now, we mark them, every single marking point is awarded, single point. So every marking point has its own allocated message, if you like. So you can go down to that level of degree, one mark level. It's gone past the days where you used to get sort of, oh, you got 10 for this question or something. It's now broken down by individual questions. And Results Plus has a variety of forms. In fact, it's its simplest. You can simply ask for a breakdown of your students' marks. That's the simplest way of doing it. You can ask for an analysis of your students' marks against other comparable centres. So this is a generic thing, not a specific thing, but it will say, for example, I'm a rural school in Asia with my school's a medium size. It's got 500 pupils. It's mixed. How do I compare with other Asian schools of a similar quality and characteristic? And it will give you some sort of comparison of how you stand in relation to them on certain questions. You can go even further. You can actually say, if you want to identify your candidates by who taught them, you can say, if you're a large centre, you can say, would you analyse the results based on who their teacher was? So teacher A results against teacher B results. You can have that sort of analysis done if you wanted to. So that is up to you. Some aspects of it are free. Just getting the marks is free. Other aspects like detailed analysis are charged for. If you use a past paper for your mock, you can mark it and then have the same analysis as if, obviously it's your marking, you mark it, but you can submit your marks to get the same analysis. of your students. And it will help you identify where your students are strong, where they're weak. And especially if you're a big centre, it might give you a chance to follow things through like that. You can get access to the scripts. You can request access, sorry, I just moved up there, to paper 1. All right, so you can get paper 1. When you get it, it will then show against each answer the candidate's done what marks they were rewarded. So you can get an idea of it there as well. As I said, for paper 2, that can't work, but you already have the candidate's script, if you so speak. We've got their files, and you can receive a detailed breakdown of marks by question, sub-question, and so on. And then you can look at your students' work. What if you're not happy? Well, of course, you can always go guess an inquiry about the results. You can ask to have the papers remarked. This is something which I'm busy doing at the moment. There's not a lot of them, but there are people who say, oh, I've got a feeling something's gone wrong here. This has been missed, or why hasn't they been given this mark, and so on. And you have 2 levels of that. A remark is simply that, just remarks it. Or you can have a remark with a commentary, where the examiner will actually tell you why your student wasn't getting the marks. So that's another possibility you can do. So that covers all the areas of support anyway, and so on. Online, this is always a bit of a thing, but I really hope you found this page, this particular page, all right, of the of Pearson's website. And do bear in mind, you have to be a registered user to get some of the materials. Some of the materials are blocked unless you have to be registered. So make sure you have actually, through your centre, registered you as a ICT centre for Pearson qualification and as a teacher. If you can't get to it, then your exams officer almost certainly can. So if you're having trouble downloading materials, ask your exams officer to download them for you. But that page there you can see on the screen is the page to go for. Click through, all the materials are there that you can possibly want. Also, you'll see on that page a link to Tim Brady. Okay, and Tim Brady is a great guy. He's been doing this as long as I remember, and he's the person. I know someone was asking about more materials. You'll need to go to Tim and put this request to him. He won't be able to answer your question either, but he will know someone that can. So he will pass that on to somebody else to get an answer for you. Okay, so that you can get help. So Tim's there. It's on that page. I think actually we've got a slide with him coming up in a minute anyway. Results Plus, I mentioned all the features about that at the moment. So you can get a full analysis of your performance by question, sub-question, teacher, gender if you wish, age of pupils. You know, it's unlimited. Get and look at it. And that was that. There is a thing called Exam Wizard, and you can get into that. This is something which allows you to mark quick homework assignments, topic tests and mock exams, and you get an assessment of how they're doing as well. So if you want to explore that, look at Exam Wizard. This is your access to scripts, so you can see obviously the script for paper 1, and as I mentioned, paper 2, of course, you've got it already. All right, there is a curriculum match student book and an active book. They are available. Here is the student book. I should point out, we must point out that there is this element, of course, of things are moving on. So the textbook is going to start becoming outdated at some point or other. So the textbook is good, but it can't be your only source of information. You must use other things as well. This is Tim. That's his email, teachingict@pearson.com. If you are also a computer science teacher, it's the same guy, and it's teachingcomputerscience@pearson.com. Okay, there is a phone number, but I really don't know if that would work, to be honest, because it's better to send him a question. He can then think about it and direct your question. Now, he is a subject advisor, so therefore he can direct questions and so on. But he will help you get to where you want to be. on things like that. And of course, you have your regional advisor in your own area. Right, and just going back now, getting to question time. So, right. Nabil has said, I'm looking at a script. There is a student with a correct answer but got 0 out of 1. Okay, yeah, so we pointed out the scripts can only be for paper 1. You've got the script for paper 2, but you can get the marking analysis for paper 2. So in other words, you can download the marking analysis of paper 2. If there's just one example like that where they've got 0 and the rest of it and everything else is fine, I don't really think there's much you can do. But of course, if that would have made a difference when you get the grade boundaries and have a look at it, then you have got until the end of this month, the end of October, to request a remark. Okay, and so obviously you're looking at your script. If you went through and found several like that, something's obviously gone wrong somewhere. Then it will be worth your while requesting a remark. Obviously, if you realise that even by getting that mark changed, it's not going to make any difference to the overall outcome. The scripts are available through, going back, this one. Scripts are available for the Access to Scripts portal. You may not know much about this, but your exams officer almost certainly does. So pop down to your exams officer. Well, I suppose that's UK schools. I don't know how you might work it in other areas, but whoever's in charge of your examinations, and you can go there to this portal and you can see them straight away. Obviously not a physical script, it's an electronic online one, but you can get it there. And obviously extremely valuable for you thinking, well, why did candidate B not do so well this year? I really expected better of them. And then you find that they had a complete meltdown during the exam or something. And it's free. So obviously I would make use of it. Similarly, if it's paper 2, go obviously onto your servers, find the appropriate candidate and his files or her files, and then go and get the mark breakdown analysis from the Access to Script portal. From Results Plus, get the mark breakdown from Results Plus. Yeah, that was on there. That's about it for me. I've left a few minutes for questions. So please, at this stage, if you're happy so far, I'll let the questions finish off on Thursday, starting at 9 o'clock UK time. All right, remember that's UK British summer time, not GMT. Then we will be looking at how we might mark some stuff. All right, so we're looking at scripts, marking, how it's done, analysing the questions, and all that sort of stuff. So today's been about delivery. Thursday is about assessment. Me personally, as a teacher, I think probably Thursday will be of great use, and I hope you're going to make it back to us then for that. There is a link coming shortly for the video, usually within 24, maybe allow 48 hours in case there's a snag with the recording, and that will be coming to you. But otherwise, unless you have a question you'd like to ask, then please feel free to go, and we will just take any questions. One's come in. Are there any revision guides or workbooks for the IGCSE? I'm afraid, as I said right at the start, I'm an examiner. I don't know about publications. Teachers will probably be more familiar. Social media is the best place to go to look for things like that. Don't forget, of course, the domestic GCSE, the UK GCSE in information technology, is similar. And therefore, you can go and look at materials for that, understanding, of course, that it may not cover all the curriculum that you have for the international. Okay. Otherwise, folks, we're winding up. So, and yeah, see you on the 3rd. Yeah. Any more questions? Right, there don't seem to be any more questions coming. I don't know what that means. I've just completely bamboozled you all, or actually it was useful. I hope it was useful. So, yeah, do feel free to leave at any point now, and we will hang on a few more minutes and then we'll shut things down.